Lego Nick, what do your elf eyes see?
Really? That's what we're going? Hey, guys.
Hey,
Nick here from 4playernetwork.com. I'm here with Brad.
hello.
We saw and played, well, I played, Middle-earth, Shadows of Mordor from Monolith and WB. Brad, first of all, you saw the demonstration. Let's talk about that first.
Sure.
What did you think?
They were mostly showing off the Nemesis system. They were kind of showing the ways you get to your target and take them out. But because of the Nemesis system, you have access to not just the main orcs you're trying to take down, but also his minions. And you can find the minions and influence them.
It basically gives you a full rundown of the hierarchy.
The hierarchy, yes.
Of the orcs. And all of the orcs within the world are randomly generated for every game you play. So they'll have different names. They have different looks. I guess they have like a mishmash of they just have like a ton of different details that just throw together.
There's probably just a ton of like recorded dialogue and then a bunch of art assets thrown into a random generator, and that kind of makes the orcs of the game. They also randomize like the strengths and the weaknesses of each orc.
This is cool because this is one of the things that I feel wasn't necessarily explained super well leading up to this event. Like, we got a really good look at it for the first time. So every orc has strengths, weaknesses, or some of them don't have weaknesses. Some of them just have a bunch of strengths. And it could be anything from they have a fear of a certain type of wildlife.
Which you would maybe go track down and bring into the fight.
Yeah, like if they have one of these creatures in like a cage, you can release it into battle and it will attack. It'll run into the general vicinity where you're fighting, and it will scare the orc that you're fighting, which might send him running away.
Trigger like a chase. Or you might just have guys who are really good in hand-to-hand combat. You know, maybe there's a certain type of attack that they're really good at defending against, and you'd have to mix it up to like sort of take them down.
Yeah. So
in battle.
So in the demonstration, they were basically trying to show off the ways in which you can interact with the different minions and how you can ultimately take advantage of them or use them to get to the war chiefs, which is the higher up people who basically a lot of your objectives throughout the game are going to be tied to these war chiefs because they have the most power or sway over the land. So you're trying to eventually get to them.
Are the war chiefs like also part of a hierarchy? Does taking them out like influence someone above them?
Yes. Well, okay. So
all the way to your battle with Sauron.
I recorded an interview, and I did ask him specifically about how your actions in one region might affect the other regions, and he explained that. So I'll leave that to the interview.
So I did notice that there are regions. This isn't exactly like a complete open world game.
It's a bunch of areas. It's a bunch of really large open areas that are interconnected.
Kind of like an earlier Assassin's Creed game.
And kind of like how the new Dragon Age is going to be.
Yes.
But one thing I will say, this is really cool. This is what happened because after the demonstration, I played it for about 40 minutes, and I had a guy walking me through it and explaining everything. And during my demonstration, I was trying to get to a war chief, and I eventually took out that war chief, and then it sent me on. You can then I took control of that war chief. But there's 5 different war chiefs in the area, and the more if you have control over each one of those 5 war chiefs, you have more control over that area as a whole, and you can do different things.
What does that affect?
I don't know yet. Like it's one of the it's going to have an impact on the story. Those are the kind of things they didn't necessarily go into great detail about. But he explained that you have 1 war chief, which is all that you needed. But if you want to try and go for 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5, you're welcome to do that, and it will enhance your control of that region. But so I decided to take the war chief that I just took control of and use him to do what they called sort of riot mission, which is basically to create an uprising to take out another war chief.
Yeah.
But if in the midst of that combat, if that war chief dies, you suddenly don't have a war chief. So it's kind of like a risk or reward thing. You can send that war chief you already have to take out the other war chief, but if he dies, then all of a sudden you have no war chiefs. But in the midst of that combat, I ended up I was in the middle of a fight with that war chief, and I accidentally I took control of one of his bodyguards. Each orc has their own set of bodyguards.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of the fight, I grabbed the bodyguard by his head and I took control of him. And then 2 seconds later, I just hit a button and I did a kill. I cut off the war chief's head, and all of a sudden I killed that war chief, and the bodyguard that I had just taken control of moved up the hierarchy and became the new war chief.
But did you still have influence over him?
And I had influence over him already.
I gotcha.
So all of a sudden, I had influence over that war chief. So I kind of took a shortcut. I killed him, and then the lower guy that I had took his place.
So how was the combat itself? How did it feel?
Combat feels really good. It kind of feels like a mishmash between like Batman and Assassin's Creed and kind of all these games that have been doing some really interesting things with combat.
Does it feel less mushy than Assassin's Creed combat?
Yes, less mushy than Assassin's Creed, but it shares elements of it. But the combat's really diverse. There's a lot of layers to this combat, so you can use your arrow, and since you have wraith abilities, you can use these wraith abilities to like teleport great distances.
Teleport arrows. I saw that.
Yeah, but you have to be aiming at a target, and if you hit the target, you can teleport across.
Like he even used it on like a beast.
Yes.
And he
it's called
teleported
shadow mounting.
onto shadow mounting.
So
I'd like to mount Shadow from Final Fantasy VI. You know what I'm saying? Sorry.
I shadow mounted 2 beasts. One that looked like a Rancor, which is this giant thing, and the cool thing is what
disgusting.
It was like this giant Star Wars Rancor looking thing, but he could also climb with the same kind of agility as Talion, the main character that you're playing.
I noticed in a trailer as well, he was riding kind of like a warg or whatever, more like a big beast like that, and that thing was also like mantling ledges and stuff.
Yeah. So like your character can climb. In a lot of ways, it shares a lot in common with Assassin's Creed. But after playing it, I feel like it's a lot of people were concerned this game might feel like an Assassin's Creed clone. It certainly doesn't feel that way. It feels like it borrows a lot of elements from Assassin's Creed, but it definitely has its own personality and it leaves its own mark.
The Nemesis system is definitely, like, I think, going to be the hook for this game. But I have a question for you, and it's a question I pray that you asked in the interview, because if I was there, I would have been, make sure you ask this question.
Well, we already know I screwed up.
So a lot of the ways of the you manipulate orcs in the Nemesis system, and maybe you can like convince an underling of one of these war chiefs to kind of like betray him and maybe stab him, and that would like drop down his health in combat, or just fight on your side in a battle. Please tell me you asked him, like, if you're just really good at combat, could you take down one of these war chiefs without even worrying about that stuff?
I didn't ask him that, but I know the answer to it, which is yes.
You sure?
Yes.
Because in
the beginning of the demo, he was explaining how the hierarchy works, and he said, so you can take control of one of these lower minions, or if you're feeling lucky, you can just go straight for the war chief.
But that would almost make it seem like if someone was really good at the game, there would be like significantly less content and like maybe less interesting content, right? Because if the brilliance is of the Nemesis system, and if someone just is good at the fucking game and they can just bypass all that, there's a lot of time and quality that they're not even experiencing.
Well, you know what I'm going to say to that? I feel like we should talk about that in the podcast.
Okay.
So I'd say if you want to hear my answer to that, I do have an answer for it, and I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to save it for the podcast tonight, though.
Okay.
So if you're watching the video, check out the Day 4 E3 podcast. We'll talk about it on there. But yeah, the game, I'm really stoked for the game. It was my number 1 game going into the show, and it's definitely one of my number 1 games coming out. So that's pretty cool. I'm glad we both got to see it. So, of course, 4playernetwork.com. Keep an eye on it. E3 is actually over, but we still got a few videos to record. And, of course, keep it locked here.
Keep your eyes locked to 4playernetwork.com. That's my Nick phrase.
Yeah.
Has Nick said lock to in every video we've done?
Maybe.
Okay. See you
but
later,
I haven't
guys.
done this yet.
See you later, guys.